This city has been given and continues to be given truly special importance by both the Ukrainian side and the Russian armed forces, because this city is not just a large infrastructure facility connected to an entire network of communication routes with the region, but the most important thing is that overall, speaking so to say, in military language, it is a good staging ground for accomplishing all the tasks set at the beginning of the special military operation. That is, from this staging ground, from this sector, it is convenient for the Russian army to move in all directions that the General Staff considers the most promising. That is precisely why it was always designated by the Ukrainian side as one of the priorities in the Donetsk People's Republic, and by our armed forces as well. Among a number of other fortified areas, this was also one of the powerful fortified areas. Today, it is entirely in the hands of the Russian army, as was reported just recently by the commander of the center grouping. This question apparently arises in connection with what? With the fact that doubts persist to this day. Is this really true? If someone has doubts, we have already spoken about this. I have already proposed this. And what did I propose? I proposed that your foreign colleagues, and even Ukrainian ones, please, we are ready to grant Ukrainian journalists the right to visit the city of Krasnoarmeysk and see with their own eyes, what is happening there, who actually controls it. I remember when we did this a few weeks ago, the Ukrainian Foreign Ministry then issued a warning, saying that the Ukrainian Foreign Ministry was categorically opposed, began to threaten journalists and so on. But now the Ukrainian Foreign Ministry has nothing to do with this, since the city is fully in the hands of the Russian armed forces. Of course, there is a certain level of danger, given that the line of contact is very close and drones are constantly in the air, but our Russian military correspondents work there. I am sure that in the West, too, there are people who conscientiously perform their professional duty and are ready to objectively inform their listeners and readers about what is happening in the world, including on the Ukrainian front. Therefore, we will do everything to ensure their safety, and we will be ready to give them the right to walk through all the districts of Krasnoarmeysk. The same applies to Kupiansk.
Just yesterday, if I'm not mistaken, Zelensky declared that the AFU are still in Kupiansk. What did he mean in your view?
Kupiansk has already been for several days, that is, for several weeks, actually in our hands, fully, entirely. It seems to me that the Ukrainian leadership is now engaged in other matters, not in addressing the situation in the combat zone. In general, it gives the impression that they live on another planet, and then, being constantly on the move, constantly begging for money, they probably have no time for current matters, neither in the economy, nor, all the more, at the front. As for Kupiansk, Kupiansk consists of two parts. One part, the larger, main, central part of the city, is on the right bank of the river. The smaller part is on the left bank. The Russian forces control both the entire right bank part and the entire left bank part as well. And a little further south along the riverbank, there is another settlement called Kupiansk Uzlovoy. There, I think, there are 2,000 buildings. Fighting is ongoing there. Out of 600 buildings, around 1,600, 650 are in the hands of the Russian army. There is an advance. I think that in a few days we will take this settlement as well. But this is a separate settlement. Besides all this, I remind you that on the left bank of the river, an enemy grouping, numbering 15 battalions, is blocked, and the Russian forces have begun its elimination.
In the coming days, you are meeting with Steve Witkoff, who has come to Moscow specifically for this. In fact, the negotiation process is now taking place only with the American side. Why are the Europeans silent?
They claim to be offended, as if they were excluded from the negotiations. But I want to note that no one excluded them. They excluded themselves. For some time, we had close contact with them. Then they suddenly broke off contacts with Russia. That was their initiative. Why did they do this? Because they adopted the thesis of delivering a strategic defeat to Russia and continue to live, apparently, in these illusions, although they logically understand, that this is long in the past, that such a thing was not possible. They took wishful thinking for reality all the way through, but they cannot. They do not want to admit this to themselves. They removed themselves from this process. First, second, seeing that the outcome today also does not satisfy them, they began to interfere with both the current U.S. administration and President Trump in achieving peace through negotiations. They themselves refused peace negotiations, and now they hinder President Trump. Third, they have no peace agenda. They're on the side of war. And even when they allegedly try to make some changes to Trump's proposal, we clearly see this. All these changes are aimed at only one thing: to completely block the entire peace process, to put forward demands that are absolutely unacceptable for Russia. They understand this, and thus afterwards shift the blame for collapsing this peace process onto Russia. That is their goal. We see this clearly. Therefore, if they want to return to reality, based on the situation on the ground, as they say in such cases, please, we allow for this.
May I ask something else? Siarto today said that we may find ourselves in a state of war with Europe. Literally today, he said that NATO's European part is preparing to bring its forces to full combat readiness by 2029 and 2030, and that there is a risk of armed conflict. This is in fact a very serious, almost sensational statement. How do you regard it? Are we preparing for something?
We are not going to fight Europe. I have already said this 100 times, but if Europe suddenly wants to fight us and starts, we are ready right now. There can be no doubt about this. But the question is, if Europe starts a war with us, I think it will be very fast. This is not Ukraine. With Ukraine, we act in a surgical manner, very carefully. It is clear, isn't it? This is not a war, literally in the modern sense of the word. If Europe suddenly wants to start a war with us and starts it, it can very quickly lead to a situation in which we will have no one to negotiate with. To be honest, I have not received any information yet. I know that there have been attacks on tankers in neutral waters, or not even in neutral waters, but in the special economic zone of another state, a third state. This is piracy, nothing else. Before, the Ukrainian armed forces tried to strike at our seaports. We responded, "We did not start these operations. I am sure that they are much more effective and powerful." And this, above all, concerned the ships that were delivering military equipment and ammunition to Ukraine. And we got exactly where we wanted, which is evidenced by the secondary explosions that we observed using aerial reconnaissance. But what the Ukrainian armed forces are doing now is piracy. But what countermeasures can we take? First, we will expand the nomenclature of such strikes on our port facilities and ships that enter the Ukrainian port. Second, if this continues, we will consider the possibility. I am not saying that we will do this, but we will consider the possibility of countermeasures against the ships of those countries that help Ukraine carry out these piracy operations. But the most radical way is to cut off Ukraine from the sea. Then it will be impossible to carry out piracy in principle. But this is all growing. I hope that the Ukrainian military and political leadership, as well as those behind them, will consider whether this practice should continue.